All right, we're gonna finish up this list of factors program, making it look pretty and beautiful and awesome. Um, this video was about to be way more complex, and I just did a quick little Google search because, again, Python's not like the programming language that I'm most comfortable with. And, just a really, really nice feature of Python showed up with it, and this video all of a sudden becomes very different than what I was expecting it to be. So we have this issue where, we have our factor list program that, you put in a number over here and it will print out all the factors of that number. The issue is it doubles up. And I don't want it to double up. That's what we were going to fix in this video. Now, originally, what we were going to have to do is inside of this if, we were going to have to go through the entire list again to check to see if I was already in the list. And we do that by doing, for and another double for loop, which is super, super inefficient. And we're going to check if I is equal to list at 0, then I'm not going to append this stuff because it's already there. And then I would just keep going through the loop to make sure that it's not equal to any of these things. And if it is, then we skip out. We're not going to do it. But there's actually a really, really nice way that Python takes care of this for you kind of automatically. And internally, it's probably doing something like this, running through the whole list and checking to see if it exists in the list or not. But we get to do it kind of for free. So there's this special little reserved word in Python that lets you just check if something is in a list, if this item is in a list. So I can say, all right, if I times j equals the num, I know that I and j are factors. But we're also going to check, and so if I times j is the num, I want to append it to see, to add that pair to the list. But I also want to check, and I is not in the list, so the factor list. And this literally does it, right? Python sometimes feels like you're just speaking to it in like English. And this will do it, right? So if the pair of numbers multiplies to make the number, I'm planning to append it, but I will only do that if I is not in the list already. Because if it's in the list already, well, I've already got it. And if we run it like this, it's already done for us, right? Because every time I do I times j, it's checking if I is not already in the list. And so, right, like let's take a quick look at this. If an if statement works, if the whole Boolean statement inside of this parentheses is true, right? So let's take a look at the second time we would see 3, 4 here and see why this is true or not, right? Because, or you know what? Excuse me. We're going to look at the very first time I'd put an item in this list. So 112. If I times j is equal to num, right? So right now I is at 1 and j is at 12. 1 times 12 is 12. So this first part is true. So that's good. Now the second part is saying, and I is not in the list. Well, at the moment, before I've added anything to the list, it was blank. So I is not in the list, which means that this second half of my if statement, is also true. And the way and works is if you have, it only comes out true if both of the things are true. Since both of them are true, it works. Now let's get to the point where, so this is not breaking it if we find something that's not on the list yet. Let's see why it doesn't print the second 4-3 or the 6-2 or the 12-1. So we have these things in the list. This is the list that we currently have. And we're still going through these loops. We get to, all right, now we're at our fourth time going through this I list. So I is equal to 4 and j is equal to 3. So that's going to trigger, hey, this first part is true, right? So we have a true to start. And with I being 4 and j being 3, that would be the next thing we used to add to this list. So now I times j is num, that's true. And I is not in the factor list. So I is currently 4. But if I check the factor list, 4 is in the list, which means saying I is not in the factor list, 4 not in the factor list, That's not true. 4 is in the factor list. So the second thing is false. And if you have an and with a true on one side and a false on the other, it's not a true statement. It's not a true Boolean statement. So this if comes out to be false. So I skip it. I don't append I or j. And then it will do that same thing for any time I come across any of the other numbers, like 6 or 2 or 12. And that does it for us, right? Even just checking only the I, because these are pairs, the I always goes with the other matching j. That's enough. We don't even need to check if I or j is in the list. It's just if they multiply to make the number, we want to think about putting it in the list, and we just got to check, is I already in the list? Because if it is, we don't want to repeat it. And that should be good, right? So we're going to try like 25, see if that works. Still working okay. We're going to try 46. Still working okay. It's only giving us the 2 factors. There is an issue though now. We got rid of the the duplicates, but we're back to a one-dimensional array. And you're like, okay, that's no problem. We'll just do exactly what we did in the previous video. I'm going to make a new pair. I'll just make a pair, empty pair. And then I'm going to say pair dot append I, pair dot append j. And then I'm going to say factor list dot append the pair. But there's a problem. When we do this now, we get our duplicates again, right? Looking pretty, looking beautiful, got the two-dimensional array, but we've got these repeats again coming up at the end. And the problem with, the reason why this happens is because I check I and j, and it's saying an I is not in the factor list. So if we come back to, we'll go back to 12 here. Come back to the 12 over here. If I is 4, right? And we already see 4 in the list over here. We should not be entering the if statement. We should not be appending the second instance of 4 and 3. But the issue is, this is checking if I is in the factor list. So it's checking, all right, is the first index 4? No, the first index is the pair 112. Is the second index 4? No, the second index is the pair 26. Is the third index 4? The third index inside of there has a single element in there that's 4. But this third item over here is not the number 4, so it's not counting that as being in the list. So we got to get a little thoughtful with this. And the way that immediately appears to me is to kind of create the list twice, to kind of cheat it a little bit. And this is what I mean by that. So I'm going to get rid of this double 2D array because it was working nice before, right? We already had this doing what it was supposed to do before without the repeats. So I have my list of all the items without the repeats. And instead of just straight up returning factor list over here, what I want to do actually is I'm going to come over here and I don't know why the cursor keeps going away. I'm going to try to convert the list that I already have into a 2D array. And the reason I'm going to be able to do that is because I know that any factors of a number, they always come in pairs. So I'm just going to go through the entire list and for every other one, create pairs out of it. So let's just start trying out how to do this. Let's see. So all right, we have our factor list is good at this point, right? So let's make a comment in here. Oh my gosh, the cursor is, why is it not there? So this is creates the non-repeating list of factors, but it is one-dimensional. And I want it to be two-dimensional. So now over here, we are going to convert to 2 dimensions. And this is where, right, like comments start to come in handy just to stay a little organized. So now that factor list has all the factors. Okay, factors. So we are going to make a loop for I in factor list. Yeah, for I in factor list. So this is not using the range, right? It's just going to go to every single item in factor list. I am going to that's not what we want to do. For I in factor list, so I want every other item to be appended. I want to take index 0 and 1 and make a pair out of that. Then I want to take indexes 2 and 3 and make a new list out of that. I think I'm going to do a while loop instead, just so I can see the mechanics of the loop a little bit more and use a modulus operator. So we're going to say while, we're going to make a new counter. I'll say C equals 0. And while C is less than the length of, factor list.length. Is that how it's used? Let me just print like hello and make sure that this works. No, yeah, it's got to be. How do you get the length again in Python? Is it just length dot? No, it's length of factor list. That's what it is, right? Nope. What? Oh, it's not length, it's len, and it's a reserved word. Yeah, okay, we're printing hello a bunch of times. That's not what we actually want to do. Also, shoot. I think I just broke this. Let's copy all of this. Reset. That's an infinite loop because I'm never changing. I'm never changing the value of C, right? You have to have a counter C equals C plus 1 in order to not go into an infinite loop. It does end eventually here, it looks like. No, maybe I do have an infinite loop going on right now. Let's reset again. Let's, okay. We're doing a bit of problem solving here. Can I just print the length of the factor list and it should not be that crazy? What the heck? All right, now it's just, I'm not even printing hello anymore. I think what we need to do is reload the page. Code sculptor. And try it again. Great. Okay, it's not broken. Let's zoom in. We got it. We're good. Back to normal. So the length is 4. Cool. So and length. All right. So now we're gonna make it a while loop again. While C is less than the length of the factor list. Well, C is less than the length of the factor list. We are going to, well, first put a colon over there. C is less than the length of the factor list. Less than the length of the factor list. What am I trying to do? Oh, I'm trying to, every other one I'm going to make my own pair. So if C modulus 2 is 0. So this will be if it's an even number, right? If my modulus 2 is 0, that means I don't have a remainder. I am going to create a pair, I'm going to create a pair list, and I'm going to say pair.append factor list at C. And I'm also going to append the one right after it. Pair.append factor list at C plus 1, right? This way I get to kind of like cheat a little bit. And now that I've created a pair, I am going to I'm going to also, before this, make like a final factor list, which is going to be a blank list for now. And I'm going to say the final factor list dot append, and I'm going to append the pair. And then here we would output the final factor list. And then once we finish this if statement, I would just say C equals C plus 1. I could just, yeah, there's a nicer way to do this where I don't even need to use modulus, isn't there? I mean, let's see if this works. Boom, it does work. Okay, let me do this. Let me do this the nicer way than using this if. We don't even need to use an if statement. I could just say, because I know that the very first number is going to be the first of a pair. So I really could, instead of doing all this if, I could just say, I'm going to make a pair. I'm going to make a pair. I'm going to append C and C plus 1 to pair, and then put that on the list. And then instead, I'm just going to go by twos. And this will guarantee that I'm just going to the first item of each pair. I think this is it. We're good. Still does the same thing, but without a modulus. Okay. This is confusing because I just did this. This is what comments are for. But let's just run through it. Now, I'm going to print in all of this, by the way, right? From line 1 to line 23 is one function. It only returns on line 23. All this in the function, this is just the one part where I call the function. So let's go through this all one step at a time. We're going to print out the factor list. And we're also going to make a little print statement saying, factor list 1D array. Let's go through this, right? Just to get an understanding of what I just did over there. Because when I'm coming up with a solution myself, I'm not explaining it to you. So let's look at it. So the factor list 1D array is 1, 46, 2, 23. This is, we already saw how this factor list program works at the beginning of this video. I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. Yeah, I think at the beginning of this video, we saw how this I not in the factor list gets rid of the repeat, right? And that was our 1D array. Now in here, right, so we have the 1D array, 1, 46, 2, and 23. And maybe I'm even going to do this with 12, just so there's a couple more factors to look and see how it goes. Okay. We have our one-dimensional list. We want to change it to a 2D array. So this is going to convert to a two-dimensional array now that factor list is all of the factors. So we have 1, 12, 2, 6, 3, and 4. But I want it to be a 2D array so that it looks a little nicer. I've got the list of pairs instead of just all of the factors. So what I did is I started C at 0, just because I'm going to make a while loop. I made a final factor list, a new blank list that I can play around with so that I can return the final factor list. I don't just want to mess around with factor list as it is to start, because as I start messing around with it live and I'm still going through it in the loop, it's going to screw things up. So I made a new list to add things to before I return that brand new list, which is the 2D array. So while C is less than the length of that list, right? That just is going to make us, as long as C is smaller than the length of this list over here, we're going to keep going through. It's been a while since we've done a while loop. I created a new list pair inside of there. And to that pair, I'm going to append at C. So because C started at 0, I'm adding 1 to that first pair. And then I append to that same pair factor list at C plus 1. So 0 plus 1 is going to bring me to index 1 over here. So the pair is now holding on to 1 and 12, the second index. And then what I do is I take that pair, and on line 21, I append that pair to my final factor list. So that's how this first pair gets appended to the list, right? I was 1 and 12 were at index 0 and at index 1. So I started C at 0, C 0, 1, right? And then because I know that factors come in pairs, instead of going one at a time and doing an if statement that's really confusing, I just say, well, I was at 0. The next pair is going to start in, 2 away, right? So index 0 is the start of the first pair. Index 1 is its buddy that comes along for the ride. And then at index 2, 0 plus 2 gets me here. I'm going to get the start of the second pair. So I do C plus 2. So now I come back to the top of the while loop. C is 2. 2 is still less than the length, which is 6. And then I check, all right, well, I make a new pair. I'm appending to my pair factor list at 2. So that's going to be 0, 1, 2. I'm appending 2 to my pair. So it's currently holding on to 2. And then on the next line, I append 2 plus 1. That's going to be factor list at 3. So 0, 1, 2, 3. I'm appending 6 to the pair. So that means that my pair is 2, 6. I take that pair and I append that pair to the final factor list, which is how we get 2, 6 in there. Finally, C, right, I'm holding the number 3 up, but that's because I was doing C plus 1. C still hasn't changed yet. C is still 2. So now I go to C is equal to itself plus 2. 2 plus 2 makes 4. Top of the while loop, 4 is still less than 6. I'm going to go to index 4. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Do the same thing. I'm going to make the pair out of 4 and 5 because it's at C and C plus 1. So the pair is 3 and 4. It's holding on to a list of 3 and 4 right now. I append to the final factor list that pair, which is how this gets appended here. I do C is equal to itself plus 2. So now it's 4 plus 2 is going to make 6. 6 is not less than 6. The while loop ends. I have this two-dimensional array, the final factor list that I wanted. I return it. We're done. It prints that out. I'm like afraid to end this video because I think it's going to be super long, but that's okay because it's a bonus video. We finally have, if I get rid of this print over here, our fancy list of factors program, correctly named, no longer list of multiples, giving me a 2D array without repeats. It's beautiful, right? Only, and if I get rid of some of this unnecessary white space here, only like 21 lines of code. Just kind of confusing, Yeah, that's it. This is pretty cool. Now we're moving on to our turtle program. That's next week. That's what we're doing.